Hello, welcome to the latest video from 1040 Abroad. I'm Olivier Wagner, and today I'll discuss the 5 myths about renouncing US citizenship. So, there are many urban legends which oftentimes come with some old truth that might no longer apply, and I'll discuss that in this video. I have been preparing a tax return since 2012, specializing in people renounce US citizenship since 2015, and that's a few things that come up as I talk to my clients. First one, you will have to dispose of all of your assets, sever your ties with the US. So, unlike Canada or Australia, the US operates on a citizenship based taxation system, which means that you're taxed on your worldwide income as long as you're a US citizen, and it doesn't have to do with your ties with the US, except, of course, if you consider citizenship to be a tie. So you're a US citizen, you have to report tax on your worldwide income. You're not a US citizen, you would only have to report US sourced income on a US tax return. Um, at the same time, there's a deemed disposition of all of your assets if you are covered expatriates. So those are people who would have owed at least $450,000 a year in tax on average over the past 5 years. We have more than $2 million of assets, or who failed to certify that they have 5 years of tax compliance. So that's not an actual disposition, that's just a deemed disposition. They would have capital gains reported on that. So, right, so you can keep on having real estate in the US, have your US bank accounts. You will be a non-resident taxed on your US source income if you no longer have US citizenship. Myth number two, you will have to file a US tax return and pay income tax for the next 10 years. So that's no longer the case. Surrendering US citizenship, filing your last tax return from 8854 is a one-time thing. You will attend the interview at the consulate. The next year, you will file that final tax return, dual status 1040, 1040 NR from 8854, and you'll be on your way. You might have an exit tax on that final tax return, but you will not have any further tax returns to file. Obviously, if you have real estate and you have a rental property in the US, you would still file US tax return just like any other foreigner in this situation. But from June 3rd, 2004 to June 17, 2008, IRC Section 877 did plan that if somebody renounced US citizenship and then they spend more than 30 days in the US, then to file a US tax return and be taxed on their worldwide income. That's no longer the case. In 2008, it has been replaced by Section 877A, which put an end to that practice. You will use your US Social Security benefits. That is not the case. If you contribute into Social Security, you will keep on having these benefits. There is some truth in that military pensions and some other government pensions might be tied to citizenship. If you were working in the US Army and you renounce your US citizenship, you will lose the benefits you receive from the Army. But that's some government plans that doesn't apply to the Social Security plans that is applicable to everybody. Bit number four, you will lose your Social Security number. That's not the case. Once you have that number, you have it out for life. If you have a Social Security card that doesn't have any annotation on it, you don't need to update that either. And if you have a credit history, you can keep on using that to gain a credit card or otherwise get a loan from lenders. Of course, you would have to answer truthfully if they ask you whether you're a US citizen or not. You will have to answer to the negative to that question. Myth number 5, you will never be able to return to the US. Um, so it's mostly untrue, it's mostly false. There's some truth to that, in that the Weed Amendment, which was passed in the 1990s, say that those who renounce US citizenship for the purpose of evading US tax would not be allowed back into the US. Um, there should have been a way for the IRS to share information with the Department of State in order for that to be implemented. That has never happened. As such, the only way for people to be banned from entering in the US is if they themselves said that they renounce US citizenship for the purpose of evading to avoid paying US tax. So unless you volunteer that information either at the consulate or when talking to the border agent at the border, you will not be prevented from entering in the US. And every year, thousand, I think we had $10,000, 10,000 people renounce US citizenship every year. And over the past 20 years, maybe a dozen have been preventing from entering the US as per the Reed Amendment. And usually that's because they volunteered the information themselves, which is different from the non-immigrant intent that applies to all foreigners entering using a non-immigrant status. If you go to the US as a tourist, you need to have a home elsewhere, and your intent must be to return to that home. So if all of your life is in Canada, you're a Canadian citizen, you can still go to the US as a tourist. If you've lived all your life in the US, you're a US citizen, your family is in the US, your business in the US, etc., etc. You buy citizenship in St. Kitts and Nevis, you surrender your US citizenship, and you want to go back to the US as a tourist, you might not be able to do that. But that's not the Reed Amendment. That would simply be because you have not established ties to a home outside the US. All right, that was the 5 myths surrounding renouncing US citizenship. Here's my email address if you want to ask me any question. And that's it for now. See you around. Have a good one.